This is X, and he's a great guy, high IQ. He's a high IQ individual.
And he's got this, check out this cool train he's got.
All right, so today we're diving into something pretty wild. We're talking Elon Musk, former President Trump, and the federal government. All kind of tangled up together. You ready for this?
Definitely.
Okay, picture this. It's a snowy day in D.C. We're in the Oval Office, and who's standing there with President Trump? None other than Elon Musk. Oh, and he's wearing a MAGG hat, by the way.
Wow.
And to make things even weirder, Musk's son, little X, is hanging out on his dad's shoulders. Later, you see him playing behind the resolute desk. It's not your typical Oval Office scene.
Not at all.
This was a big moment for Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or as everybody calls it, DOGE. Now, Musk says this whole thing is about cleaning up the federal government, getting rid of waste and abuse. But a lot of people are calling it an attack on democracy. So is Musk really trying to make things better, or is there something else going on here? Well, that's what we're here to unpack.
Right, yeah. That Oval Office address, it was definitely a power move. You've got Musk, this tech giant, standing right next to the president. It's like they're both trying to take down the establishment.
It's a crazy image. Musk in a MAGG hat with George Washington's portrait in the background. And then you've got little X running around. He was only 4 years old at the time. There were even reports of him shutting down the internet in the Oval Office.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. And Trump was praising how smart X was. It's those little details that make this whole thing even more fascinating. But beyond the visuals, that event really cemented the Trump-Musk alliance. It showed they were willing to bypass Congress and the courts.
Like they were above all that.
Exactly.
And then there was that Time magazine cover, the one with Musk sitting in the president's chair.
Oh, right, yeah.
It really makes you think about who's really in charge.
It does. But things weren't all smooth sailing for DOGE. There's been a lot of pushback.
Yeah, people like J.D. Vance have been raising concerns. They worry about a potential constitutional crisis if courts rule against DOGE and Trump ignores them.
Right, that's a big worry.
So let's break down what DOGE is all about.
Well, Musk says it's all about getting rid of wasteful spending, making the government run more efficiently. He claims he's fighting for the people, trying to make things better for everyone.
Yeah, like one example they always give is Musk getting access to Treasury payment systems. He says it exposed all these outdated practices, and it just fueled his whole deep state narrative. He wants people to see him as battling against a corrupt bureaucracy.
And that message definitely resonates with some people, especially those who already distrust the government and those who support Trump's anti-establishment views.
They see DOGE as a way to drain the swamp.
Exactly.
But then you have Trump saying he always abides by the courts, which, our sources tell a different story.
Yeah, his actions, especially during that hush money trial, don't really support that claim.
So what happens if courts start ruling against DOGE? Will Trump actually listen?
That's the big question.
And there are even some Republicans who are getting nervous about DOGE.
Really?
Yeah, they're worried about federal jobs in their districts being cut.
Makes sense. Those jobs are important to a lot of communities.
Exactly.
So you think that Oval Office appearance with Musk was partly about damage control?
It's possible. It was a way to calm people down, maybe try to control the narrative. And remember, Musk actually took questions from reporters that day.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which is pretty rare for him. So maybe they were trying to be more transparent.
Maybe. But we have to remember that DOGE's early targets were carefully chosen.
Like USAI and the CFPB.
Right. Those agencies were already unpopular with certain voters, so it was an easy win for them.
But what happens when DOGE goes after bigger agencies, like the Department of Education or FEMA? Remember, Trump actually called for dismantling FEMA at one point.
Yeah, but the consequences of that could be huge.
For sure. Going after smaller, unpopular agencies is one thing, but taking on these massive departments is a whole other ballgame.
Right, and there's a real risk of unintended consequences.
Like, what if they slash funding for the NIH? It might save money on paper, but it could have a devastating impact on medical research and on universities.
Absolutely.
We even have sources mentioning Senator Britt calling for a more targeted approach to saving money. She's worried about the dangers of these sweeping cuts.
Yeah, it's like using a chainsaw when you need a scalpel.
Exactly. And then there's a whole conflict of interest thing. Musk overseeing agencies that regulate his own companies.
Right. How does that even work?
It's pretty ironic.
Yeah.
He's all about transparency for DOGE, but then he files a confidential disclosure form.
Yeah, something doesn't add up there.
And Trump says he won't let Musk exploit his position. But given Trump's own history with conflicts of interest?
Yeah, I don't know about that. It's funny, in a way, that Oval Office event was supposed to address concerns, but it might have actually made things worse. People are even more suspicious about Musk's role in the government now.
It definitely raises a lot of questions. Questions we'll keep digging into as we go deeper into this story. So, can someone like Musk, with all his businesses, really put the public first, especially when those interests might clash?
It's a tough question, and it gets even more complicated when you factor in all the political gamesmanship going on.
Yeah, we know Trump isn't afraid to push the limits.
Right.
It's like walking a tightrope. On one side, you have this desire for change in government, more efficiency. But on the other, there's this concern about power getting too concentrated and the possibility of that power being abused.
Exactly, that's the core issue.
How do you balance the need for reform with the need for accountability and transparency?
It's a question governments have been wrestling with forever.
And it feels like DOGE is really pushing those boundaries, shutting down entire agencies like USAI and the CFPB. That's pretty drastic.
It is, and it makes you wonder about the role of the federal government in the first place.
Yeah, what should it be doing?
Trump and Musk seem to want a smaller government, less involved in people's lives.
Right.
But others believe the government should be more active,
Right.
regulating markets, providing social services,
It's a classic ideological battle.
playing out right in front of us.
We're basically watching a live experiment.
Yeah,
How far can you stretch executive power?
and we don't know how it's going to end.
Will DOGE actually make the government better? Or will it just lead to chaos?
Can be either one.
More corruption, people losing trust in the system.
It's possible.
But one thing's for sure, this whole relationship between Musk, Trump, and the government, it's something we need to pay attention to.
Absolutely. The stakes are too high to ignore.
We need to hold those in power accountable.
Right.
Doesn't matter what party they're from or how much money they have.
We need to ask tough questions, demand transparency.
It's about protecting our democracy.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've seen DOGE go after some smaller agencies.
Right.
But could they actually target giants like the Department of Defense or the EPA?
I mean, it's possible, but it would be incredibly risky.
Yeah, it's like they think government is just a computer program. You can just rewrite a few lines of code and everything's fixed.
Right, but it's so much more complicated than that.
It's a whole web of institutions and regulations and people.
Yeah.
You can't just rip out parts of it without causing major problems.
Exactly, and we're already seeing some of those problems.
With the backlash from federal employees and contractors and people in communities that rely on government services.
It seems like DOGE isn't really paying attention to those people.
Yeah, they're so focused on their own ideas about efficiency. But what about the real-world impact? It makes you wonder who this is really benefiting.
Right, is it really about helping the public? Or is it about something else?
Consolidating power.
Maybe pushing a certain agenda?
We need to think about the long-term consequences, too. What happens if DOGE weakens these essential agencies? Like, what about our national security? Or our environment? Or public health?
Those are all valid concerns.
We can't just focus on the short-term gains. We need a government that can handle the big challenges, the ones that will affect us for years to come.
Absolutely.
So for anyone listening who's trying to understand all of this, I think the most important thing is to be skeptical.
Yeah, don't just believe everything you hear.
Question everything.
Do your own research.
Look for different perspectives.
Talk to people who disagree with you.
We need to have real conversations about this, not just shouting matches.
We need to figure out what kind of government we want.
And what kind of future we want to build. Well, that's about it for our deep dive into DOGE. It's been a wild ride, and we've covered a lot of ground. But this is just the beginning of the conversation. Keep digging into the sources, ask questions, and most importantly, stay engaged. The future of our government depends on it. Thanks for listening.